Hey guys, what's happening? So we're jumping back into Aliens versus Avengers. And all I'm gonna say is this one had a couple of twists that I wasn't expecting. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, do be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, we're taken to another universe at another time. Cause for a moment here, the story's taking us back to reveal a few things and also explain how some of the things we saw in the first issue came to be. So one of the first things we're shown here is a group of androids, or synthetics, looking down at the engineers' people, who are pretty much the race who created all life in this universe. And as they're looking down on them like they're a bunch of ants, one of these synthetics, he mentions how these are the people who created all life in this universe, and how that life created them. But now that he's met the engineers, he's not at all impressed, because he goes on to say, I would think meeting one's creator would have some higher value, would feel more significant than meeting one's maker, but I feel no differently about the engineers than I do humanity. So one of the others asks if he's offended, to where he replies saying, appalled, that something like that is the origin of something like me. To where from there they release the black goo that's like a weaponized pathogen onto the engineers, or at least this group of the people of their race, and I'm not really sure if there's a name for them. If you know, let me know down in the comments. But essentially these people are just exterminated like ants, and it kind of feels like a twist on the events from Alien Covenant, but man, there's more. Because after this we jump forward 100 years and 10,000 planets later, where now this group has killed all life in their universe, with this world that they're on now being the last of them. And so one of these synthetics, he asks the main one here, who's like the leader of these guys, and we'll talk about who he is in just a little bit, it's crazy. But now that they've gotten rid of all life in this universe, they ask him, more or less, how does he feel now, whether it's sentiment or pride, and he eventually tells him that he feels relief. And so after this, next we jump forward 1,000 years, where over this vast amount of time, after wiping out all life in their universe, they've now discovered that there are other universes out there. And not only that, but they found a way to travel to them. So because of this, they believe that they're full of purpose again. So from here, they end up traveling to the next universe with the intention of going from one to the next to cleanse them all. So from here, this takes us back to the main universe that this story takes place in, 20 years prior to the events we saw in issue 1. And it's here, man, where we get two different twists that I did not see coming. Because at this time, at what used to be Avengers Tower, we see a deal being made to place the company under the umbrella of Weyland Corporation. And the man we see who's inking the deal, and quite literally becoming the old man of Weyland in this moment, his name is Tony Stark. Which I guess was being saved for this moment, because prior to this, he wasn't called by name. He was just referred to as the old man of Weyland. And so after he inks the deal, Mr. Weyland steps into the room, with one of his guys popping a bottle of champagne, so he asks Tony if he wants a drink, only for Tony to tell him that he doesn't drink, which is funny. But Mr. Weyland goes on to say that Tony surprised him, because he didn't expect Tony to strike a deal. Because Mr. Weyland thought this would eventually lead to some hostile takeover, or at least Tony would go down swinging, only for this to play out as more or less the opposite. So Tony asked Mr. Weyland here, have you ever heard the expression, playing possum? And for a moment, Mr. Weyland's like, excuse me? So Tony asks him again, playing possum, have you heard of that? So Mr. Weyland answers the question and he tells him, no, I haven't. So Tony explains to him, it's when an animal pretends to be dead, but isn't. So next Tony asked, do you even have possums in your universe? And this has Mr. Weyland speechless for a moment. So Tony goes on to break it down for him, because he tells him, at first I thought you were just a run-of-the-mill corporate sociopath. All that relentless aggression and single-mindedness is something I'm very familiar with. But it was the uncanny way that the Weyland Corporation never repeated mistakes. Your company's unemotional practicality and total lack of institutional memory, it felt like an inhuman organism, almost alien. So I got curious. It took some time to get inside your systems, but I needed a closer look to fully understand what I was dealing with. What a horrifying box you are to open. So as soon as Tony says this, Mr. Weyland just tackles him, because Tony's figured out what he is. So at this point, Mr. Weyland, he's dropping the whole charade, and he tells Tony, this is twice you've surprised me. And I gotta admit, same here. But Weyland goes on to say, delightful, it must be a lot to deal with, the knowledge of the unavoidable extermination of you and your world. death from a bullet, fired before you even understood the idea of a gun. So right here Tony asks, how long do we have? So Wayland tells him, the seed of your extinction will arrive in 16 years and 3 months. I would project your survival horizon to last 20 years, given your race's guile and bravado. And so right here, Tony's just like, thank you. That's the information I needed. And the next thing we see is Tony's Iron Man gauntlet cover his left hand as his repulsor blast charges up. And it's right here in this moment where Mr. Wayland realizes that this was all just Tony playing possum, which from there brings us back to the present day, where Tony has Mr. Wayland's head in a jar right next to his body. And it's like now with us getting this substantial piece of the backstory, not only do we know who Tony is, but now we know how he knew when the Xenomorphs would come, as well as why his preparations for their arrival was so insane. But like we saw before, they've come to the point now where after Valeria's death, Tony believes their only chance of survival is leaving Earth. And when Carol Danvers calls for Tony to come speak to the others, he tells Miles and Bruce, we're leaving Earth. And when Tony says this, for a moment here it has Miles like, what? Because sure, he said the same thing not too long ago, but he had no idea how ready and prepared Tony is for this, how prepared he's been for this. And now that they've exhausted all other options, they haven't heard from Clint, Steve, or Nat, so now Tony and Carol believe this is the only choice they have. So Tony tells Miles, we have to save ourselves. Unfortunately, I've been preparing for this. And as soon as Tony says that, the symbiote tells Miles, careful, we can only trust this one so far. So for a moment this has Miles like, what does that mean? Tony? But after saying this, the symbiote goes quiet for a while, and Tony has Carol show Miles how exactly he's planned for this years ahead. And it's right here where Carol hits a button and the ground starts rumbling, where they show Miles an image from a recon drone, revealing to him that this building is actually a ship. So it has Miles like, you built an escape ship out of a building? And Carol tells him no, he built an escape ship, then built a city for cover, only for Tony to tell them that they're both wrong. And he tells them this escape vessel is a colony ship for seeding a new world. And right away Bruce connects the dots, because he asks Tony, which you mean to populate with everyone here in the city? And Tony says yes, but then Bruce tells him there are only about 1,400 people here, Tony. Minimum viable population to both avoid extinction and manage genetic drift is higher than that. And Tony understands the math, but he's being very optimistic because this is the only solution he's got for the number of people who are here. So he more or less tells Bruce they're not pre-industrial primates. They have advantages, they have experts, it'll be enough. But Bruce just gives him this look like, I don't know, Tony. And during this time, people are getting boarded and seated just below. So Tony asks Miles if he can check on them. So Miles is like, sure, anything I need to be looking for? And the symbiote's like, food. But Tony just tells him that he's referring to people having their seatbelts fastened for takeoff, because they'll be leaving soon, and after they do, they'll need to stop by Mars on their way to leaving the solar system, so they can let the mutants know that they're abandoning Earth. And after they leave Mars, that's when everyone on the colony ship will get put into stasis. So Miles hops to it, and from here, Tony tells Carol to send out the war machines for the next step, because just before they take off, Tony wants to make sure to have them collapse the superstructure, because every now and then an alien will get through. So to make sure that none of them are trying to creep in and hitch a ride, they have the war machines just blow it all up and seal off all the entrances. Or at least that was the plan. But when they finish, there's still a section that's not destroyed. So right here, Tony's just like, that's impossible. There was no failsafe on them. The only reason one wouldn't fire, and you can tell right there he knows why. So he tells Carol to get a camera on that section. So she does, and as soon as they enhance the image, the first thing they see is Captain America running through that opening with a ton of people behind him. So Tony's just looking at the screen like, damn it, Steve, you're late. Because Tony thought he was dead. And Bruce points out that Steve has got hundreds of people with him. While Carol's like, no one left behind, that's our captain. But right now, not only does Tony point out that they have the engines primed and they're set to lift off in under a minute, but Steve and all these extra people, they're over a mile away. So Bruce is like, we gotta delay the launch. But Tony's only looking at this from a logical perspective, because this leaves a hole in the wall where the aliens can come through. So if they wait, they could be risking everything. And as Cap's leading these people to salvation, there's a moment here where he does a very Captain America-like thing, because he tells everyone to keep going so he can stay back and fight some of these aliens off. And Tony's just watching like, yeah, this is it. This is how we die. This is how it all ends. The Avengers, America, the world. But I'll admit, it's pretty cool seeing old man Cap fight these aliens with the shield. But as Bruce and Tony are watching this, Bruce starts to make his way outside, and he tells Tony, "If I'm not back in time, go ahead and leave. I know you have to." So Tony's just like, "Bruce, you can't do this." So Bruce tells him, "If I do nothing and just let my friends die, what does that say about me, Tony?" And Tony tells him, "We're not going to fight our way out of this. We have to survive, or it was all for nothing. We're going to need your mind more than your might in the coming days, Bruce. Stay." But Bruce, who's already hulked out at this moment, he goes on to tell Tony, "I can't do that, old friend. If I did, I'd be a monster." As Bruce just leaps down to join Cap. And now this puts Tony in the position where he has to make a choice. Like, does he stay and wait for Steve and Bruce and risk what just might be the last of humanity? Because we don't know what Mars is looking like right now. Or does he leave Bruce and Steve here and be the monster that Bruce was talking about? And it's a hard decision because it's messed up either way you look at it. So Tony asks Carol how long could they stay, only for her to quickly tell him he knew he wasn't coming back. And like you said, the front door is open. We go now, or we don't go at all. So after hearing this, Tony pauses for a moment, just before saying, "Launch," as they take off, leaving Steve and Bruce behind. And it's crazy to see. But at the same time, it's like you either save who you can, or you gamble the possibility of losing everyone. Because aside from the 1400 who Tony has here, we still gotta see how things are looking on Mars. And regardless of how you look at it, it doesn't make it any easier for Tony, having to leave his friends and the others behind. And following this, as they make their way to Mars, the next thing we do is head back to the station by the black hole, where we see an engineer ship arriving. And in this brief moment, we're not given much of any context. But now with us knowing more about the black hole that we saw in issue 1, as well as this station's purpose and the laboratory inside, it's implied that these engineers are discovering much of what we learned up to this point. Because as they look at this station, we see the words translate to infection, and they are not happy about it. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.